You know, when the Twin Towers fell, it felt like America's entire security system had just crumbled to dust. But the huge, sprawling security architecture that rose from the ashes, it wasn't built from scratch. The crazy part is, the blueprints, the warnings, the core ideas, they were already there, sitting in a government report, just gathering dust on the day the planes hit.
To really get what happened after 9/11, we first have to rewind and look at the world right before it. A major government commission had just wrapped up a 3-year study on national security, and their final report? Well, it contained a prophecy of the danger to come that was just chillingly accurate.
Take a look at that date, February 2001. We're talking just 7 months before the attacks. And the Hart-Redmond Commission, they weren't being vague. They laid it out in black and white, exactly how vulnerable the U.S. homeland was. They basically said a catastrophic attack wasn't a matter of if, but when. They saw the storm clouds gathering long before anyone else felt the rain.
And then, the theoretical became terrifyingly real. 9/11 was the catalyst. It took all those warnings and turned them into an urgent, unavoidable mandate for action. And it triggered the single largest reorganization of the U.S. government in over 50 years.
Okay, so let's dive into this new architecture of American security. First, we'll look at how they forged a shield by creating the Department of Homeland Security. Then, we'll get into the attempt to finally connect the dots with the Director of National Intelligence. After that, we'll see how they tried to break down the walls with new powers. And finally, we'll touch on the debate that's still going on today, security versus liberty.
So the first critical problem they had to solve was, well, fragmentation. Before 9/11, keeping the country safe at home was this chaotic patchwork of different agencies, all operating in their own little worlds, their own silos, and often not really talking to each other. The solution they came up with was radical, a mega merger of historic proportions.
And the sheer scale of this merger, it really boils down to this one single number, 22. That's how many different, distinct federal agencies were pulled from where they were and smashed together into one brand new department.
I mean, just look at this list. The diversity is staggering. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 brought together the people who guard our coasts, the people who inspect our borders, the folks who respond to hurricanes, and even the agency that protects the president. All of them now under one massive roof, with one primary mission: secure the homeland.
But hey, forging a shield wasn't enough. The next huge failure identified was in intelligence. The 9/11 Commission's most famous finding was that the clues to stop the plot were actually there, but the agencies had completely failed to connect the dots. The system needed a new brain.
You see, before 9/11, you had the Director of Central Intelligence, the DCI, but that title was a bit misleading. They were mostly just the head of the CIA, with very little real power over other big players like the NSA or the FBI. So the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 created a whole new job, the Director of National Intelligence, or DNI. This person was designed to be the single leader, the conductor of the entire intelligence symphony, who could manage the budget and, hopefully, force all 16 agencies to play from the same sheet of music.
And if the DNI was the new conductor, then the National Counterterrorism Center, or NCTC, was where the music was actually supposed to be made. It was built to be the central hub, a fusion center, where all those different streams of intelligence from the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, you name it, could finally flow into one place to be analyzed and turned into plans you could actually act on.
So we've got new leaders, we've got new centers, but that still wasn't enough. There was a third massive problem, a legal and cultural wall that literally prevented intelligence agencies from sharing what they knew with law enforcement, and vice versa. To stop the next attack, that wall had to come down.
This sledgehammer they used to do it was the controversial USA Patriot Act. I mean, this thing was passed just weeks after the attacks, and it completely changed the legal landscape. It made it way easier to get warrants for foreign intelligence, and this is the crucial part. It allowed agencies like the FBI to share what they found, things from grand juries and wiretaps, with the CIA. The entire mission of law enforcement shifted from prosecuting crimes that already happened to preventing attacks before they could begin.
And this table right here, this just perfectly illustrates the fundamental change in mindset. The old system was totally built on a need-to-know culture, where information was guarded like treasure. The post-9/11 goal was to create a culture of responsibility to provide, where sharing information to stop an attack wasn't just allowed, it was your job, it was mandated.
So let's recap. We've got a new mega department to guard the homeland, a new intelligence chief to connect the dots, and powerful new laws to tear down those old walls. The scale of these changes was just immense, creating this incredibly powerful new security machine.
But they also kicked off a debate that is very much alive today.
It is really hard to overstate how historically significant this whole overhaul was. You literally have to go all the way back to the start of the Cold War, back to the creation of the Department of Defense and the CIA, to find a government reorganization on this magnitude. It was a top-to-bottom redesign of the nation's defenses, and it was done in just a few short, frantic years.
But here's what's really interesting. Even as lawmakers were building this powerful new system, there was an awareness, a recognition of the potential risks. So the very same law that created the DNI also created this, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Its entire mission was to be a watchdog, to make sure that, in the rush to make the nation safer, its fundamental values weren't being trampled.
Which leaves us with the essential and still unanswered question. Here we are, more than 20 years later. How do we even measure if this new architecture has worked? Yes, we've avoided another 9/11-style attack, but at what cost? And as the threats keep changing, the challenge of finding that perfect balance between protecting the country and protecting its principles, well, that remains the central, unfinished debate of our time.